You know, losing weight is hard. A lifetime of persistent dieting had left some serious scars on my heart, soul, and mind. And each failed diet left deeper wounds, making it harder to start the next time. There are so many struggles with weight loss that it often feels like being asked to slay a dragon, armed only with a pencil and cardboard body armor. Like you must climb a 20,000-foot mountain in a single step. If I had to summarize how it felt into a single word, it would be this word: overwhelming. In my own life, I did the up and down thing. I would gain weight, reach a point where I couldn't take it anymore, then go on some miserable diet till I lost some weight. Then I would stop the miserable diet and slowly gain the weight back. However, to add insult to injury, each time I gained the weight back, I would gain a little more. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I equated losing weight with failure and more weight gain. Each time I stopped dieting, I would take a little bit longer to go back on another miserable diet. I often had to wait for some massive source of motivation, however, a triggering moment, as it were. Perhaps it would be a number too high on the scale, a picture of me that hid nothing, the feeling of bursting out of my clothes, an overly honest comment from a young child, or perhaps a work competition, or maybe a special event. Whatever the reason, I would latch on to that source of motivation and race to drop as much weight as I could before the motivation ran bone dry. Losing weight shouldn't be a race, and yet it was for me every single time. Not a race against anybody else, but a race against my own willingness to continue. I needed to lose the weight before I would give up. I started each diet looking gleefully forward to the day when I would get to quit doing it. I would tell myself I was happy with the diet I was doing all along the way, but the truth is, I was never happy with it. Sure, it's fun to eat chicken wings, bacon, steak, and omelets all the time while I did keto for the 12th time, but damn, it gets old after a bit. You can only eat so many omelets and cheese sticks before it starts tasting like cardboard. And this battle against my own will continued on for decades. Sometimes I would lose 2 or 5 pounds, and other times I would lose over 50 pounds. Each time ended in burnout, where I would go running back to the life that made me fat. The moment something unexpected came up, I would toss my plan out the window and say I'll pick it back up next week. And then I would just sort of forget. No one was asking about it, and I sure wasn't going to bring it up. Failure. Again. Every time I failed, there would be this moment where I would be alone with my thoughts, and I would ask myself, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Each failed diet was just another check mark in the reasons why I suck column that I kept in my mind. It felt stuck. Like I would never get this weight off. I felt like I was missing something that others who had been successful had. I felt hopeless, and so I resigned myself to my fate. I guess I'm just a big guy, so I would tell myself. I guess I didn't win the genetic lottery. So what's the point of even trying? I'll just lose and gain forever, but I might as well find a way to be cool with being the big guy. I would search for ways to be happy with myself. I talked about my love for food, about my disdain for exercise. I would do everything possible to reinforce with myself that I was okay with being big. And of course I did this. Who wants to live a life of being unhappy? I sure didn't. It's about as human of a condition as it gets. But I wasn't happy. Because you see, in those quiet moments alone, looking at myself in the mirror, I would feel shame. Shame at what I had done. Shame at my lack of self-control. Shame at my seeming inability to get my weight and body under control. Shame at my long string of failed diets in my past. I was waiting for something or someone to save me when I was losing hope that would happen. And then the turning point. The unthinkable. You see, it was early May of 2019. I remember the call. My mom woke me up at night with a phone call to tell me she was taking my dad to the ER. His heart was beating really fast and they were worried. So they were going to the ER to get it checked out. Now for me, this set off all sorts of alarms in my head. as my dad was the kind of guy who would never go to the doctor for stuff like that unless it was pretty bad. He was very much the suffer in silence type of person, never wanting to be a burden. I anxiously waited for the call the next day. And when I got it, I was told his heart was okay, but that there was something else they found. Scans revealed masses all over his lungs and a 10-centimeter mass on his liver. Cancer. I was in shock. What could this mean? Cancer. What were they saying? Is it bad cancer? Is there such a thing as okay cancer? This sounds like it's not good. Then my dad told me he would like for me to come home to Arkansas from Kansas City, and I knew in that moment something was up. I could hear the fear in his voice, even though he was trying to hide it. I immediately went home to Arkansas. I can vividly remember the family meeting in the living room where he informed us all that he had hepatocellular carcinoma, liver cancer. It was inoperable, and that we were in miracle territory. The doctors gave him less than 2 months before he would be gone. Later that day, I was aimlessly driving around with my dad alone in my truck, and we were talking about what's next. Does he try the one potential treatment that was probably not going to work and only just make the time he had left miserable? Or does he make the most of what's left? Now, I told him that life is his journey. It's his choice to make. And while I do have my own thoughts on the matter, it must be his choice, and that I will support him no matter what he chooses. He thanked me for that, and we sat in silence for a bit. I broke the silence after a minute and asked him a question. Because you see, he was my mentor in business, in life, and he was my friend. I got his advice on so many things, and he was always teaching me lessons, always letting me make mistakes and helping me find the lessons in my errors while he helped me wipe the dust off to keep moving forward again. I was beginning to realize I was about to lose this in my life. I looked to him and I said, Dad, if there are any lessons that you've been sitting on, things you have been waiting to tell me till I was older or until I've gone through some experience, could you tell me now, even if I won't understand? He said he would think on that and let me know. And you see, I don't know if this was even fair of me to ask him, but I was scared I was about to lose my dad. And so I did ask. A couple of weeks later, he called me and said he did have something to tell me, a piece of advice. He told me to stop waiting around, that if there was something I want, to ask for it, and if I don't get it, to move on, to stop being so afraid of what might happen. At the time, we were talking about work things, as I had been really wanting a promotion at my job, but I had never actually asked for it. I realized later that he was talking about so much more than work. He was talking about life. Stop waiting around. And then the unthinkable happened. In less than 2 months' time, from the moment we found out about the cancer, my dad passed away. At 68 years old, he took his last breath as he was surrounded by family in a quiet room. As my mother whispered into his ear, "It's okay. We will be okay. You can rest now." And then he took his last breath, and he was gone. My best friend, mentor, more importantly, my dad, was gone. I was alone. The unthinkable had happened. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had so many plans. There was supposed to be many more decades of happy memories. There was so much life that was supposed to be experienced. It's not fair. Why did this happen? What do I do now? This is what I thought to myself. I never felt more lost and alone than I did at that time. There was a hole inside of myself so big that I felt like it would swallow me up whole if I looked too far into it. I just wanted to escape the pain, to bury it up and not look at it. But it was too large to ignore. It was not something that could just be covered up with a little food. All my normal modes of escaping my emotions didn't work. The shock and grief and pain were so great that it would blast right past all my normal coping mechanisms and emotional avoidance methods. I felt I would just crumble from the sheer weight of it all. I was exposed to something I had never been prepared for. Not that there was any preparing for this. I didn't understand that grief of this magnitude was even possible. I didn't know I could feel this level of sadness. But my father's passing flipped switches in my head I didn't even know were there. It fundamentally changed how I viewed the world, how I viewed life, how I viewed the most precious of all human resources: time. I now truly realized and understood for the first time that time is a finite resource. There are no refunds or takebacks. Time spent cannot be gotten back. Regrets are pointless because the past can't be changed. However, I did have regrets. While I hoped my dad had no regrets, I knew that he did. I knew that on his deathbed he had regrets. He was human after all. In the wake of my father's passing, with this new perspective on time, I began to reflect on my own life. As I did so, I would think about his final piece of advice to me. I internalized and summarized his final piece of advice into a single powerful phrase: stop waiting around. Stop waiting around. I began to realize that there was so much in my life I was waiting to do. I was waiting for someone else to come and save me, waiting for some mystery motivation to come along and give me that kick in the butt to go get the things I've always wanted. And of course, as I looked over my entire life, my battle with my weight was very front of my mind. I wanted to tackle this, but then I just couldn't handle emotionally another failed diet. I was in so much pain already, and I didn't want to also be miserable on another diet. And then came a moment in time. A single moment, another one, that changed everything. A challenge to change. You see, there I was, unsure of what to do next. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to stop waiting around. And then came a moment. A simple moment in time that altered the trajectory of my life. A simple challenge to do something different. Honestly, if I wasn't looking for it, I might have missed it. I might have stayed exactly the same. It was a small moment that could have just whizzed right past me. And I could have continued on. Because you see, the truth of where you need to go, the moment, the opportunity that you're waiting for sometimes is just a quiet whisper or a simple question. A week or so after my dad's passing, I was back in Arkansas for the funeral. And the day after the funeral, I was getting food at Chick-fil-A with my sister Evelyn and her husband John. We were wrapping up our meal and the kids were playing in the playground. And we were just quietly talking about life. And in the middle of the conversation, there came a moment of silence. In that moment, John looked at me and said, "I'm worried about you, man." I was in such shock from the passing of my dad that I just didn't have much energy to react poorly to this statement, so I just listened to him. He continued to say, "I want to give you a challenge. I just want you to move for 20 minutes, 3 times a week. Anything you want. It doesn't matter what it is. Just move. Instantly, I was thinking inside my head, come on, man. Of course I could do that. I'm not that bad. I can move for 20 minutes. Of course. And then immediately thought to myself, well, if it's so easy, then why haven't I been doing it? Why is just 20 minutes 3 times a week not being done if it's that simple? I looked at him and said, I can do that. I told him that when I got back home from the funeral in a couple of days, that I'll start. And then came the first changes. This challenge did come at the perfect moment in time. I wanted to lose weight, but I needed something to start with that wouldn't make me miserable. Stop waiting around. Those words from my dad, they just kept swirling around in my head. Just start. But where to start? I took a moment to ponder on that. I didn't want to walk, honestly. I didn't want to do that. And I didn't own a bike, and I didn't want to go buy yet another bike to not ride to sell later. But I was a member of the gym down the street that I never went to. But it did have a pool. And many years prior, on a previous weight loss journey, I had gotten into swimming and really fell in love with it. So I said, I'll start there. 20 minutes of swimming 3 times a week. Seemed simple enough. I even owned all my swimming gear still, like my goggles. But if I'm going to lose weight, I figured I needed something to do with the food part too. I mean, I knew enough from a lifetime of dieting that just moving 20 minutes 3 times a week wasn't going to be enough to move the needle. But I didn't want to experience failure again. What do I do? So I thought, I'm starting super small with the exercising, so why not start super small with the food too? I sat with that question for a week or so. What do I do? What could I do with 100% certainty? I honestly couldn't handle failing at something right at that point. So I made the choice to lower my expectations to the point where success would be an almost certainty. As I thought about weight loss in its purest form, I knew that I certainly was eating too much. But what is too much? I didn't know. However, eating less, I could do that. There's literally nothing that could stop me from simply eating less than I normally do. So I decided I would not eat unless I was hungry or unless it was a mealtime. That's it. I wasn't going to worry about what I ate, just going to eat if I was hungry. I gave myself permission to say no to food if I wasn't hungry, no matter who asked me to eat. No one controlled what I put in my mouth but me, so let's just run with it. Little did I know that these 2 changes were going to fundamentally alter the trajectory of my entire life. I had made the smallest of course corrections to the heading of my life. 2 small changes. Okay, so I'm swimming a bit less and eating a bit less. What now? I wasn't so naive as to think these 2 changes alone were going to solve my weight issue. If it were that simple, we would not have an ever-growing obesity crisis in the world. However, I have decades of diet experience under my belt. I decided that rather than doing the same stupid-ass diets again, I was going to try something new. I was going to take a concept from business that I used all the time. I love this quote. To get results you have never gotten before, you must do things you have never done before. And I reminded myself of that. I wanted results I've never had, so it's time to do things I've never done. Okay, need to do something new. Told myself that my intuition was not something I could rely on like I had thought I could before. Because you see, I realized if I could intuit how to lose weight, I'd have done it by now. So clearly I can't. I decided I was going to take the Edison approach and stop looking at my old diets as failures and instead just ways not to try again because they didn't work. But what do I do instead? What do I change next? All I've successfully done with this exercise is to recognize that I had no idea what I was doing. That's all I've discovered at this point. I know nothing. So I have a problem with no known solution, no obvious path forward. This should have left me stuck, but it didn't. I felt excitement. Because you see, in this moment of cluelessness, it suddenly hit me. A realization. It was so obvious. Why had I not seen this before? Suddenly I knew how to answer my question about what to do next. While I was never able to conquer my weight and health, I had actually become very good at my job. I sacrificed my health and wellness for my job for decades. I spent a large portion of my life pouring all of myself into my work. Naturally, I'd gotten quite good at what I did as a result of that sacrifice and all that effort. Over my career, I developed myself into a systems and process guy. I referred to myself as a problem solver. My passion is creating change and creating processes to drive sustainable change. The bigger the problem and the more complex the change initiative, the better for me. It got me excited. In my professional life, I wanted the problems no one else wanted. The unsolvable problems, the ones that would require insane amounts of intense study, dedication, creativity, and outside-the-box thinking. I prided myself on my ability to make the connections that others couldn't see, to see solutions in a field of noise and chaos. This was my happy place. So I view myself as a problem solver. I had spent decades crafting and creating a framework for change management. I had used my framework many times on very large projects with success. For other people, we're talking multi-million-dollar projects. So why was I not using this in my own life for me? All of a sudden it's so obvious. I have the most intense and challenging problem staring me in the face. Literally, my weight in the mirror. And I remember the moment where I made the conscious choice to manage myself like I managed work. This small and simple mindset shift was yet another of countless tiny changes that propelled me in my life in a new direction. This is who I am, a problem solver. It was time to turn that skill towards myself, towards my own life. I decided I was going to start using my skills on myself. Might as well, right? It was time to turn my skill set towards myself for once, to work my process for the betterment of my own life instead of just for my employer. The best part of doing this for my own life, however, was that I was free to work unencumbered by the processes of company red tape, office politics, or needing to convince bosses and peers to do something they didn't understand. I would no longer be hindered by the need to explain my own intuitions to others. I could truly do what I think is best without the need to explain myself to anyone. I was starting to get pretty excited about this, actually, at this point. Time to get to work.